Abyssal Deadspaces are an excellent way for combat pilots to make ISK. They are high risk, high reward, and they scale from starting players up to more veteran players as you move through frigates, destroyers, and cruisers. They're one of the few bits of content that is exclusive to the smaller ships in the game, and they can be excellent fun. I've already showcased how to get involved in these using things like a Tristan, Kestrel, or Rifter, but today I wanted to showcase the Amarr Empire's Punisher. This is a Tech 1 frigate that uses energy weaponry or lasers, and thus makes an excellent starting point for players who use that particular weapon system. The Punisher is also one of the few Tech 1 frigates that can comfortably run Tech 1 Abyssal Deadspaces, not just the Tranquils, but also Calms, and it's remarkably easy to get into and is completely alpha friendly. Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie, and in this video I'm going to be showcasing the Amarr Empire's Tech 1 Punisher frigate running in a Tech 1 Abyssal Deadspace. It can run T0s quite comfortably, but can easily do Tier 1s as well, the Calm Abyssal Deadspaces, which is quite unusual for a Tech 1 frigate. This means that anyone who's skilling into energy weapons early on has an excellent little frigate for making good amounts of ISK per hour. It's remarkably straightforward to fit and use, and I'll be showcasing exactly how to do both of those in this video. Essentially, if you are an energy turret using player, you've started out with the Amarr Empire, and even if you're looking to eventually upgrade to cruisers or above, this is still an excellent little ship to skill into. All of the skills that we're going to be using are completely trainable by alpha characters, so it's easy, it's lucrative, what's not to love? If you do enjoy this video or find it helpful, please let me know. Hit like on the video, drop a comment in the comment section, and if you do want to go the extra mile to help support content like this and keep me making videos like this, you can do so by heading across to my Patreon page, dropping a tip in my PayPal tip jar, or heading across to my Redbubble merchandise store, all three of which are linked in the description of this video, as is the fit that I'm going to be showcasing. With all that said and done then, let's jump right into showcasing the Amarr Empire's Punisher in Calm Abyssal Deadspaces. The inspiration for this particular video came when one of the guys in Catskull DM'd me on Discord to ask if there was a ship that he could use for running Abyssal Deadspaces, since everything he'd seen online, including on my own channel, was focused much more on drones or on missiles. He knew that the Tristan, the Worm, the Healer, the Hawk, the Kestrel, these were popular ships, but he wanted to use energy turrets, and he was struggling to find something. He'd gone onto Abyss Tracker, tried several of the fits showcased there, and nothing seemed to be working for him. So, sure enough, I downloaded a couple of those fits, tried them myself, lost an awful lot of Punishers in Tech 1 Calm Abyssal Deadspaces before finally settling on this particular fit. So, it's fairly cheap, 17.6 million ISK. That may sound more some of the other fits I've done on this channel so far, but remember, this is going to be running in Tech 1 Abyssal Deadspaces, not just T0s, so we do need a little bit of extra bling in order to make this work. Now for the high slots here, I've gone for small focused beam laser 2s. The 2s are kind of important because they've got those little extra bonuses that just push us over some of the benchmarks that we need to achieve. Fortunately, that's also a really easy skill to train into, and pretty much what you're expecting to have as a energy turret focused player. I am going to be using Imperial Navy focusing lasers for this. I've got Gamma S as the main one that we're going to be using, essentially having my default orbit set to 10 kilometers. That's mainly what we're going to be using, but I also carry Standard S and Infrared if we need to hit something from further away, and we also have Multifrequency for those few targets like the battleships in Abyssal Deadspaces, where we're going to be coming a little bit closer and tighter to get under their guns. May as well have the Multifrequency to get the better tracking and higher damage on those targets. For the mid slots then, we've got a small compact lead acid cap battery. This doesn't make us cap stable, but we're going to be running electrical dead spaces, because of course we are. Electrical Abyssal Deadspaces give every single ship, both yours and your opponent's, a penalty to their electromagnetic resistance. Since energy turrets deal primarily electromagnetic damage, this means that those ships have lower resistances, and we can therefore kill them quicker and easier. The fact that we're not cap stable also also doesn't matter because the bonus to Capacitor is going to make us cap stable in there, which is a big advantage. For some propulsion, I've gone for a 1 meganewton monopropellant enduring Afterburner. It's more than enough, it allows us to move nice and quickly. There are a few situations where you may want to overheat this, so I do recommend having the thermodynamics skill trained to at least level 1 just to give you that capability to get under the guns, especially on those battleships where you need to close the gap as quickly as possible. The low slots, essentially, we've gone for 2 small armor repairer 2s. Having both of these running, we will still be capacitor stable, and you'll notice that I have these desynced. I'll activate one armor repairer, and then when it's halfway through a cycle, I'll activate the second one and keep those running. This means we are constantly getting little heals rather than one big heal in one go. This helps us if we get some of the more high power lucky shots hitting us. Now, when I ran this particular fit, I've run this through about 20 different Abyssal Deadspaces. The only thing that has caused me any trouble whatsoever is being hit by extraordinarily lucky wrecking shots. And even then, I tend to survive for the most part, unless it gets a lucky wrecking followed by another strong hit immediately after. Again, why you may want to overheat the Afterburner sometimes, just to close those distances. The rest of the tank comes from a reactive armor hardener. If you're not familiar with this particular module, this is an active module that increases your resistances by 15%, and it actually modifies those resistances based on the incoming damage, meaning if we go up against something that is doing primarily electromagnetic and thermal damage, those resistances will increase, and the unused resistances, in that case both explosive and kinetic, will decrease accordingly. Then if in the next room we suddenly find that we're being hit with kinetic and explosive damage, the reactive armor hardener will react to that and increase those resistances whilst dropping the electromagnetic and thermal. Essentially, this works out as arguably better than a multi-spectrum, which just gives you a flat bonus across the board whilst it's active. It does take a little bit of time to kick in, which does give you a little bit of a couple of scary moments from time to time. Again, especially if you get hit with some of those lucky shots, your armor might shoot all the way down, only for those resistances to suddenly increase and your armor repairers to take over. It can look scary at times, but trust in the tank, it will hold for the most part. Finally then, with the 2 remaining low slots, heatsink 2s there are enough just to push up our DPS. We don't need anything else in those low slots, that will keep us going, and it gives us a nice total here of 157.7 with those Gamma S currently fitted. The really cool thing about energy turrets as well, whilst I'm not particularly a fan of Amarr Empire ships and lasers, essentially the fact that these can be reloaded near instantly is really beneficial, because it means you can just quickly go, nope, that's not working, and swap to a different focusing crystal and start shooting at the ranges that you actually want to shoot at. Really cool, and something that, as you know, a cannon user and a missile user with nice long reload times, I do kind of envy a little bit, but hey, let's not get into that, shall we? Finally then, for the rigs, we've got a small capacitor control circuit too, again, just to help us maintain capacitor stability. Doesn't look cap stable currently, but whilst we're inside the electric Abyssal Deadspace, that does push us into cap stability. We then have a small processor overclocking unit in order to be able to fit all of this in here, and finally a small thermal armor reinforcer just to push that thermal resistance up that little bit higher so that we take a little less damage from some of the really nasty stuff in Abyssal Deadspaces. A lot of the really heavy hitters deal primarily thermal damage, so by hitting that resistance, we are less likely to be hit by some truly scary shots. Anyway, that's the fit. Again, I will have that linked in the description of this video so you can drop it into Python or into the game and have a look and play around with your own skills, but otherwise, let's showcase it in action. Since this is a video on running calm Abyssal Deadspaces, I kind of have to assume you know the basics of how these work, but just to reiterate, make sure you're in a fleet, have the filaments in your cargo hold, 3 for a frigate, 2 for a destroyer, 1 for a cruiser, and then just use them whilst in space, jump through the gate, and boom, we're inside. Now, the first room we've got here is a Damavik and a Kikimora. I actually had a really nice run prior to this where room 1 was 3 Disparu troops, 2 of the frigates, 1 of the cruiser, followed by a Charybdis, and this was a really great run to showcase, but the footage got corrupted. So this one I'm showcasing as the second best because I make some catastrophically stupid mistakes in this and still manage to get through. The theory behind me showcasing this is if I can survive whilst flying like a moron, then someone a little bit more competent should be able to do this just fine. That's my theory at least. Now, the first thing I do when I warp into the room is activate that reactive armor hardener, and then the 2 armor repairers in counterstep to each other. Remember, I activate the second armor hardener halfway through the first one cycle. Now, this is controversial. Not a lot of people necessarily do this. I do this because if you activate them both at the same time, it's a longer period between the cycles, meaning if you take a little bit more damage, you can push yourself into hull, which you can't repair. Having them in counterstep like this means I'm constantly repairing a little bit, and it's less likely that I'm going to actually hit hull. Now, the more eagle-eyed of you may also have spotted that the Afterburner has taken some heat damage. That's from the aforementioned Charybdis room. Essentially, I overheated my Afterburner just to close range, and as I mentioned, I'm an idiot. I didn't bring nanite repair paste, so I've just jumped into the next room without having repaired that. But hey, it's fine. As I said, I survive. We can make this work. The problem is that at this point, I'm sitting here looking at this striking Kikimora and wondering, why am I not ranging on it properly? I actually try changing from the Gamma, which has an optimal range of around about 10 kilometers, to eventually Standard, and after a few moments of a lag spike, eventually it does change and I start hitting the Kikimora. The reason I'm not hitting the Kikimora with the Gamma is because I've forgotten to activate the Afterburner. It's just not active, and at this point in the run, I haven't spotted this either. So I'm just hitting with the Standard, which is working, although admittedly, it's taken me this long to do any damage to the Kikimora that Kikimora's Disintegrator has now ramped up. Remember, disintegrators ramp up in damage over time, whether they hit you or not. The longer you leave these alive, the more damage they start doing when they do actually hit you. And you'll see in a second, this Kikimora actually gets quite a nasty hit on me because that disintegrator has ramped up for so long and is now actually getting some decent hits on me. Eventually, though, I have figured out that the Afterburner has been left off. I've activated it. There's that big hit that I was talking about. My armor repairers start panicking a little bit at this point, but I'm like, no, it's fine. The Kikimora is nearly dead, and I finish it off. Now that it's dead, no threats to me anymore. Beautiful little red explosion in the background there. The armor repairers are going to bring me up nicely. And back to Gamma S, I'm moving towards that biocompetitive cache, but because I didn't have the Afterburner on, because that fight with the Kikimora went on for so long, it's managed to drag me away from the biocompetitive cache and away from the transfer conduit. This is not a great run. I've already wasted a lot of time on this, but hey, I make these mistakes so that you don't have to. And now that we're getting a little bit closer, you see I swapped to infrared there. That gave me an optimal range of closer to 20 kilometers, allowed me to shoot that from a little bit further away. I can now straight away go into the open cargo and start drifting towards the biocompetitive cache in order to loot it. What you'll see I do at this point as well is once I've got that loot set, I know I've got open cargo set, I move the mouse down to where the loot all button is going to be and I start spamming the left click. Just so that the second that loot all button appears, I've looted everything and off we go. I can now activate the transfer conduit and move towards room 2. The upside, I guess, if it really counts, of me taking so long there is that my shields have recharged a bit. Not that it matters at all, just I guess means I've got a bit of buffer before my armor repairers start actually having to do their job, but it's no problem. Anyway, we come into room number 2, an Ephialtes Lancer and a Lucid Watchman. These can be a little bit more scary. They certainly have a bit higher damage than the Damavik and the Kikimora do early on. The Lucid Watchman, I think, or is it the Ephialtes? The Ephialtes is also quite a fast-moving ship, despite the fact that it's a cruiser, and so it does close distance quite quickly, and again, if I wasn't running the Afterburner properly, I could end up in a situation where I just cannot get into good range with it. I'm running the Gamma S right now. Again, it's got about a 10 kilometer optimal. I think it's exactly 9,900. So I want to be within that sort of range before I start opening fire. And now that we're in range, I can start shooting, and you can see we're getting some decent damage there off on the Lancer. Its shields go down quite quickly. Again, being sleepers as well, it does have Omni resists. Not that I can change my damage type anyway, but it means that I've got, you know, good electromagnetic resistance against me on the shield, better electromagnetic resistance on the armor. Nothing I can do about that, just gotta kind of keep orbiting and keep shooting. I watch the range, and if this thing starts to pull away a bit, I can change from gamma to standard or even infrared if it manages to get that kind of range. It won't. It really won't. I'm also keeping my eyes out for that cloud in the distance. There is a bioluminescence cloud in this room. That is the big blue cloud. That's going to massively increase my signature radius if I fly into it. So I really don't want that to happen if I can help it. I'm looking at that orbit. It's going to bring me close. If I hit that, I will take a lot more damage because a bigger signature radius means that Lucid Watchman is going to hit me easier, and it's going to do bigger hits. Remember, your signature radius doesn't just figure out whether or not they hit you. If you have a large signature radius, it also means they are more likely to get the big hits on you. Now here you can see this Lucid Watchman is currently keeping a range of about 12 kilometers. That's more than the Gamma can realistically keep up with, so I do swap to the standard at this point because that's now well within the optimal, and it just gives us a bit better damage there. You can see optimal of 16 kilometers this time around, which obviously that 12 kilometers is well within, so we're getting better hits. You'll also notice that when you're fighting the sleepers, you'll often see that once you clear through the armor and shields, the actual hull of them is pretty small. So it looks like there's a lot of hit points left, but it's really not that many strikes. Once we're through the armor, the rest of it will drop quite quickly. I've tightened my orbit as well. I've swapped back to Gamma, and once I start getting within that range, you'll see that, again, we really chew through that hull nice and quickly. And I'm now comfortably away from that bioluminescence cloud. We're good with that. Just wait for the Watchman to go down, and again, we'll take on the biocompetitive loot case. You'll see I'm not bothering to go for the extraction nodes. There's very little point. The amount of loot in them tends to be very low, and in a ship like this where I need to be fairly close to those caches to even shoot them, there's just not much point going all of the way out to go and collect them. I would rather just grab the biocompetitive cache, which is where the majority of the loot from this Abyssal Deadspace is going to be. Then we can just move on and run more Abyssal Deadspaces over and over and over again. I'd rather run multiple and just get the biocompetitive than run a few and spend all that time on the extraction nodes as well. Now, I do actually get some really nice loot from this one as well. I think in addition to the usual sort of filaments, Esogen, and obviously the red loot, I think I actually managed to get myself something like, not a Rediva blueprint, but one of the blueprints of one of the big ships was quite nice as well. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but it does push up the value a little bit. The estimated value shown in my loot screen on the left-hand side is slightly misleading because actually that doesn't include the fact that those blueprints have 0 estimated value because they have to be sold in contracts. You can't sell them on the market. So yeah, you can figure that out and actually make a lot more ISK than the game may have otherwise suggested. Now we've got a Disparu troop room, and this thing looks pretty. I like this room a lot. When they start shooting, you've got missiles and other little bits and pieces going on. But again, these are fairly fast. They can do some high amounts of damage, and they've got surprisingly good tank as well for the most part. But fortunately, they are within our optimal range, and we just hit them hard and fast. It's just, there we are. First one's already down. Now there is a target painter on me, which means I should theoretically be taking a bit more damage, but it's just not doing all that much to us. So I'm quite comfortable just flying around, orbiting these, and ripping them apart quite quickly. No real issue there. I should be, making sure I'm orbiting the correct one. Big mistake I see some people make is that they hit orbit on something and then start shooting a different one, which suddenly changes the range. Especially with things like lasers that have such a narrow distance between optimal and fall off, you really want to make sure you are orbiting the target that you are at so that there is very little range differentiation between when you start shooting and when, as the things move. They don't pull out in and out of range. You keep that as constant as possible, because lasers, as I said, you've got, once they're in optimal, once you go beyond optimal, the fall off is very short and sharp. So make sure you're orbiting the target and holding that orbit comfortably. Again, I'm watching this, that it's going to 11, it's going to 12, and you can see that this one now its active tank is beginning to heal it up a little bit. It's because I tried to pull away to the biocompetitive cache, hoping this thing would, you know, keep up with me, hoping that that attacker pacifier would keep up with me. It didn't. I actually had to pull my orbit back, and suddenly I finish off very, very quickly. 19-kilometer range there to the biocompetitive loot cache. Same thing as usual, we're going to move towards this. I'm just going to keep going with the Gamma at this point. It's out of range technically, but the second it's in range, pop, there we go. We can open the cargo. As we drift towards cargo again, move the mouse down into a position where we're ready to start spamming the loot all button. There we go. Second that loot all button appears, click, 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 button appears, loot everything, and move towards the origin conduit. That's the run. That is this entire Calm Abyssal Dead Space completed. Nice and quickly. It's about a 10 and a half minute run in total, despite me being an idiot. Like, genuinely, that first room took a lot longer than it should have done. I took a lot more damage than I should have done in that room, and if I can survive that, if I can run this whilst playing like an idiot, well, yeah, there we go. Just remember, if you come up against the Charybdis or any of the other battleships, you want to get to as close to them as possible, as quickly as possible, without going straight in a line at them. Spiral inwards, get close, under their guns, and start shooting them. Anyway, folks, that's it for today's video. Let me know if you found this useful. Drop a comment down below, hit like. Otherwise, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.